we're going to be joined by Matthew Meeks, Global Programs Manager at Front. Matthew, how's it going?
Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing amazingly well. Thank you for asking. So I suppose it's over to you.
That sounds great. And so I have a few slides here, and I don't know if we can see them. I think that they might be pulling up for everyone right now. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So James, as you mentioned, and for everyone listening in, my name is Matthew, and I help direct global programs here at Front. And what I'll be talking about is transforming traditional companies with a customer communication hub. So for about the next 15 minutes, we'll present a few slides, and then we'll leave a few minutes at the end for questions from the audience. What we'll be covering today is first diving into those common customer experience challenges in more of these traditional industries or with more of these traditional companies. The second, we'll actually talk about what a customer communication hub is. Third, we'll discuss a few case studies of how Front is actually transforming some of these companies. And fourth, I'll actually wrap up with a few lessons that we here at Front have learned to work with and deal with more of these traditional companies and share some of that knowledge with you. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's dive into what exactly it means to be traditional. Now, before I kind of give my answer or my thought on it, I have a quick question for all of you. When I say traditional industries or traditional companies, what comes to mind? And I'll just pause here for a moment to let you think about it. So some of you might actually be thinking of a very specific industry. Some of you might actually be thinking of your own customers, or maybe you yourselves have said things like, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We're too busy to change. Well, we've always done it this way, so why do we have to fix something if it's not broken? And maybe some of you actually thought of a physical office space. I know we're not all back in the office quite yet, but some of you might have thought instead of exposed brick walls, a foosball table, a nap room, some dim lights, and just a water cooler when thinking about these traditional companies. Well, ultimately, there are a number of characteristics when we think about some of these companies who are more traditional than others. And first, I do want to mention that this is industry agnostic. Now, there are some industries that have been around longer than others. Stereotypically, they might have a few more traditional companies or more of this traditional mentality. But these companies can exist in any industry. They also might think that they're too busy to change, that they have so much going on, they are a little bit adverse to change. Third, they are focused on self-preservation. At the end of the day, what they are thinking about is that we've always done it this way, and it's always worked, so why change? And lastly, another characteristic is having comfort in the status quo. This idea of changing systems or pivoting can actually be paralyzing or frightening to a number of these companies. But at the end of the day, every industry needs to shift from protecting its existing business to actually rethinking, reimagining, and refocusing its efforts on the future of its business, especially because, as many of you listening in today know, our customers are changing faster than ever. Because of this traditional mindset, there are some CX challenges that are associated. The first is that you have these siloed teams, tools, and even transparency. And I have a little diagram here to just explain what we mean. But at the end of the day, our customer is trying to reach out to us in many different ways. They generally only see maybe that first layer of interaction. But internally, we have all of these different teams who are operating to make sure that we are able to help our clients and our customers, whether it's operations, account management, support, finance. Many teams actually live behind the scenes to ensure that we are able to service these clients. But when you have this traditional mindset, over time, what has happened is you've actually built all of these different teams separately from one another. Therefore, you're using different tools that you have to patchwork together. And you can see from all of these arrows here in this slide that it takes so much collaboration, communication, so much is lost between this just to make sure you're interacting with your customer. Another problem or characteristic that we see is that these companies are still using an outdated inbox. And we actually have some images here. You can see on the left-hand side, this is what Gmail looked like in 2004. On the right, this is what it looks like in 2021. And the same thing with Microsoft Exchange or Office 365. You can see on the left, the design, and a very similar design almost 2 decades later. Ultimately, with these tools, companies in this traditional mindset have struggled to scale efficiently. They have thought about do we have to keep it personal with email? Ultimately missing out on accountability, some of the automation that some other tools have, or even some of the collaboration where you think of you have to forward, CC, BCC, just to loop in your colleagues. Or in thinking about the scale, they've also asked themselves, do we scale with another type of tool, like a help desk solution? But at the end of the day, this can introduce some impersonal processes. You have these information silos, some information lives here, some lives over there, and you have long training just to get the team onboarded. At the end of the day, having this traditional mindset and building in this traditional way has created disjointed communication that is hurting the bottom line of these companies, whether they're clients that you work with, or maybe you yourself thought that you might be in a more traditional workplace. You're duplicating work, missing messages, and have a lack of accountability and visibility. So that's where a customer communication can come into play to help solve these challenges. Now, you might be wondering, Matt, what exactly is a customer communication hub? Well, a customer communication hub is a platform that has a few characteristics. First, it's going to centralize all communication as it relates to your clients, both the external, so all of that interaction that you're doing directly with your customers, as well as that internal communication. So all of that internal collaboration that needs to happen behind the scenes to service your clients and customers, that all lives inside the same platform. Second, it's omni-channel. As many of you probably know, our customers love to reach out to us in any way possible, whether it's phone, text message, email, even website chat. A customer communication hub has to be able to integrate and have all of these communication channels inside its platform. Third, it's a horizontal product. And what I mean by this is that it actually allows multiple teams in an organization or company to live together inside the same platform. So you don't have to be having 3 different tools or 1 tool per team, but rather everyone can be collaborating inside the same hub. And lastly, it's going to connect to your external systems to actually create a platform that contains any additional customer contacts and information, pull it right back into that hub so you don't have to be switching between all of the different systems. Now, I won't talk too much specifically about Front, but a little bit of information here is that we are building the leading hub for customer communication. We have raised a number of funds, have over 6,000 customers in a number of countries, and the UK, we have a number of customers there as well, and we're backed by some of the leading investors worldwide. But I do want to talk about how Front is actually able to help change or transition this mindset from some more of those traditional companies and solve some of those customer experience challenges. By implementing and integrating Front into your business workflow, this allows for customer communication that is digitally transformed for these businesses. You're able to build lasting customer relationships, actually scale without those trade-offs. So you don't just have to work in an inbox. You don't just have to switch to another platform or try and patchwork them together, because they can all live inside the same platform. And this is going to really affect your bottom line and drive that revenue growth. Now, I do want to mention just 2 case studies in today's presentation. And these are coming from some of those industries that traditionally or historically might have been considered more traditional companies. The first being in logistics. Now, we wanted to present a company, MNX Global Logistics, to you because they had many of those challenges associated with some more of that traditional mindset. There was really no way to effectively track or route their messaging. They had poor response times, leading to lost customers or just a poor customer experience. And they were really not able to identify the key issues and business trends that they needed to work on. Ultimately, by implementing Front, you can see here on the right-hand side, a number of positive business outcomes happened for them. Not only did they have productivity improvements of over 200,000 per year, but you can see a number of these additional positive business outcomes like reducing employee churn, having employees work happier because they are actually using tools that have broken them away from more of this traditional mindset. Not only do we work with MNX, but we are trusted by a number of logistics companies across the board as well. Now, another one of these historically traditional industries might be considered manufacturing. Now, working with this company here, they have had a number of previous challenges, like needing a way to accurately assign emails and clear ownership. Spainar was initially trying to implement one of those ticketing systems, so having to choose between those trade-offs, but they found it impersonal and clunky. And they had no way to prioritize their system based on urgency and location. Again, by implementing Front as their customer communication hub, they were able to have dramatic improvements in their operational efficiency. Spainar now actually saves 4 hours per person per day, and they are able to field over 300 sales quotes in any given day by changing from more of this traditional mindset and working with Front to implement their new customer communication hub. We are trusted by a number of manufacturing companies around the world as well. Now, I didn't just want to talk about Front or some of the industries or companies that we work with. I also wanted to make sure that I was sharing some lessons that we have learned in working with some of these companies that are more traditional or have this traditional mindset. The first is to keep it familiar. Now, with many of these companies, change can be difficult. And so in building Front, our team has thought about how are we able to keep this familiar? How are we able to keep the platform that they're going to be using something that will be very easy to adopt in our interface? So Front is actually a customer communication hub with both the look and feel of a traditional mail client, making it even easier for some of these more traditional companies or more traditional individuals have very easy adoption onto our platform. Second is provide change management assistance. For those of you who are tuning in today, if you have customer success or onboarding teams, please leverage them. They are going to be instrumental in helping many of these traditional companies learn to set up, walk through your platform, and even work through that change management. Specifically at Front, we actually have trainings for many of these companies in just change management as a general practice, walking them through what it means to change from one software to another. I would also recommend to determine what the best package is for your team when thinking through this change management or this setup assistance. So at Front, teams over a certain size, we actually have mandatory onboarding for them, because over time, we have learned that teams who go through this onboarding process or this guided setup, not only do they have a 6% higher increase in their utilization and product usage, but when it comes to their gross retention and their expansion over time with Front, it's actually 15 percentage points higher in both gross retention and net retention. And lastly, would mention to leverage analytics and make sure that you are tracking all of this engagement to help your champions at some more traditional companies. So just wanted to show you all this Kubler-Ross model more commonly known as the change curve. So this is actually what we use to train our teams internally to help identify at what point in a customer's journey are they going through this change when switching from some of the platforms that they're traditionally used to being on front. Whether they're having to deal with some frustration or they're actually starting to see their clients, their customers experiment in those initial phases and start to engage with being on front for the first time. And now the last lesson that I think we've learned over time is to understand that this process with many of these traditional businesses is going to be throughout the entirety of their journey. Even the smallest changes can actually be upsetting to some of these companies. So you have to make sure to over-communicate all of these changes, whether it's going to be in-app, through marketing campaigns, or you have a direct account team. Make sure that you're prefacing all of these changes with these teams, with these companies, to help ease all of that change process. Be prepared to roll back and have flexibility in your process. In 2018, Front actually went through a whole overhaul of our application, changing it to make it more familiar to how people were used to using it. But we actually had a 3-phase process because we knew that some companies, they were not going to be able to accept a change after they have moved to Front. So we had 3 different timelines: those who were going to change right away, those who we were going to ease throughout the process, and those customers who we worked with to really set them up for change at the final moment. And the last thing that I will mention before turning it over to a few questions here is that these traditional teams make amazing beta testers. Oftentimes, they know what is going to resonate not only with their end users who might not be apt to change, but this is also a great way to walk them and guide them through this process to make sure that you have them on your side for any of those process improvements, any of those application updates that you are making within your business. And so these are just a few of the lessons that we have learned here at Front in working with many of these traditional companies. So not only have we seen so many positive business outcomes by having these companies switch to a customer communication hub, but we also wanted to make sure that we were sharing all of our lessons learned with you. So thank you very much. And now I will turn it over to you, James, for any questions from the audience, as I would be happy to answer them.
Matthew, that was really cool, man. Thank you for that. We do actually have some questions from the audience. So the first one is, besides general product ROI, what have you found is the best way to help convince these types of traditional companies to make the change to Front?
Great question. So just to repeat it back, besides product ROI, basically what else are we using to really help through this process or convince some of these traditional companies to be on Front? So I would say that probably proof points is going to be one of the best ways. So I know that we had 2 slides on some of these industries to show all of the manufacturing companies that we work with, all of the logistics companies that we work with. And this tends to really help warm up some of these more traditional companies to see that others in their space have made this change as well, and they have benefited from it.
Nice. The next question is, do you see differences in traditional mentalities between profiles?
Good question. So I think so. I think, well, if we're thinking, I'm thinking of profiles as basically customer profiles or maybe user profiles. I would say that end users, they tend to be more excited to adopt something new. But in implementation, I think that change process can be a little bit difficult because they are probably the ones day to day inside the application.
Amazing.
I think. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say we've got time for one more last question.
Oh,
and
perfect.
I think this one's going to be a great one. Right. What sector? And this is in your opinion, so there's no right or wrong answers here.
Okay.
But what sector do you think is the next to be ripe for disruption? Are there any left? Do you think they've all been disrupted now? Go home, or are there some left?
Good question. So. I think that there are some left, but I don't know if I would say it's a specific sector. I would say that it's anyone who is still working out of a traditional inbox. So I don't think that it's going to basically be logistics, B2B tech, manufacturing, education. But I think anyone who is still using their inbox for the past few decades, they are ripe for disruption.
Cool. Love it. I love it. Good little plug at the end there. So, dude, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. It's been so insightful.
Well, James, thank you so much for having me. And I hope everyone who's listening has a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again.